The other day, TikTok went dark. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously that TikTok will be banned. The ban will be upheld. Now, it's not really a ban, but it's an effective ban. Basically, TikTok has to divest from China. Otherwise, they must be removed from U.S. servers. When this went into effect yesterday, it was actually around 10 p.m. Saturday night, TikTok shut down with a message that said, due to the law, we have no choice but to shut down. Shortly thereafter, they said that thanks to the efforts of Donald Trump, service has been restored. And a bunch of Gen Zers, prominent, famous individuals with millions of followers, were crying on TikTok, being like, yeah, Donald Trump saved us. He saved TikTok. Masterfully done. I want to give a shout out to Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump, and all of the prominent conservatives who played this game so well at running what I would call a massive, what would you call this? PR stunt, which generated positive support for the president. That's what it was. I mean, call it whatever you want, but I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is that TikTok is spyware. It is bad for this country. It does manipulate young people. And this whole scenario has been effectively weaponized by prominent Trump-supporting voices to force Gen Z into the Trump camp. That's a good thing. I'm not a fan of these tactics, but I have to admit it was a masterful strategy to get young people to like Trump. And when you've been dealing with years of a lying corporate press, it's a bit cathartic to see a powerful move like that. Let me stress this. Look, I'm much more I don't want to say morally absolute, because that's not really true, but I don't want to say like morally flexible. I recognize that there's wartime, and I believe we need a wartime president. And I mean that somewhat figuratively. We need a president that is going to play to win and wield power in a way that saves this country. Now, what does that mean? I do believe TikTok should divest. I don't believe they should be given special treatment. But I view what's going on with prominent Trump supporters and Trump himself now praising TikTok as a masterful narrative strategy to shift the view of young people towards Trump. TikTok is still a threat to this country, which I'm going to break all of it down. And I'll explain to you why. But this was it was a PR maneuver. Ultimately, I think it does good for this country. But there is the question of deontological morals and ethics and utilitarianism. This being more of the utilitarian approach, which I tend to disagree with, that, the ends justify the means. I'm not a big fan. I think we should be honest with people. The problem is the Democrat narrative machine, the neolib neocon establishment, has never been honest, and it's resulted in the destruction of this country. So at a certain point, I recognize, without condemning nor condoning, that the actions of Donald Trump here are largely beneficial to us, with some detriment that I hope gets taken into account. But I'm not a fan. I would never do it myself. I do believe that there is criticism in the defense of TikTok, but my main point is I recognize winning over Gen Z benefits us in the long run. I don't know what to tell you, guys. The simple way to put it is good for us in the long run, but it is a nasty tactic that I'm not a fan of, and TikTok is bad. So I guess what I want to say is it feels dirty. It feels unclean watching it happen. But what do? Right? Do I sit back and watch this country burn to the ground? Or do I finally recognize that people on the right are going to start playing that game? I'll call it out. I'll explain to you the truth. And that's the difficult situation we find ourselves in morally. But let's break this down. Mike Johnson says we will enforce the law on the TikTok ban. 2 GOP senators break with Trump on the extension. Tom Cotton especially said, ain't no way. So let me give you the quick gist. So the app goes down. Trump says, I'm going to issue a 90-day extension to bring the app back. Meaningless. Trump can't do that. Trump cannot do that. Trump can issue an executive order pausing enforcement. But once you understand how publicly traded companies work, you'd realize, hey, wait a minute. That's not going to happen. As of right now, TikTok is still banned from the Google Play Store, and TikTok is still banned from the Apple Store. We are likely not going to see it restored. Now, there are larger forces at play here. It's possible that Trump issues an executive order and Amazon, Apple, Google, Oracle, whoever else just say, sure, fine. Excuse me. And then they restore TikTok to the stores. As of right now, if you have the app, you can use the app. Here's the game plan, my friends. TikTok never had to shut down. The only requirement was that other providers remove them from their servers, meaning TikTok can operate all they want. In other countries, it's still operating. TikTok announces they're shutting down, then says, thank you, Trump, because of your efforts, we're back. It's nonsense. They didn't have to shut down in the first place, and Trump didn't do anything to bring them back. Very, very obvious, but you know what? The play works. What I would say is, just to stress one more time, I despise this. I think it's important we tell the truth, and I will. But it feels very Watchmen-y. You know what I mean? Like at the end of Watchmen, when Rorschach says the people must know the truth, and Dr. Manhattan's like, you'll doom the world to nuclear annihilation with the truth. And he says, so be it. And then Dr. Manhattan kills the guy. Sometimes there's no easy answers. I will tell you I detest it, as I already did. But let's read. Speaker Mike Johnson on Sunday dispelled the notion that President-elect Trump would bring TikTok back early in his second term without the company's willingness to sell to a U.S.-based owner. I think we will enforce the law, Johnson told NBC News Meet the Press about the 90-day extension. Johnson's remarks comes just hours after TikTok halted its operation, so this we know. So let me just skip that and break it down for you. Here's how executive orders work. Donald Trump can issue an executive order instructing all law enforcement under his umbrella, which as the chief executive, he has all of it. He can tell them, do not enforce. So Trump could say, I am hereby giving an order to all executive law enforcement to not enforce the border. He could do that. He could also do the inverse. I hereby order all law enforcement to the border to shut it down. What he can't do is change the law. So the way DACA worked, for instance, is it's largely, I would describe it as, I don't know, pushing the envelope in terms of executive orders. But Obama basically said, don't enforce the deportation of people who came here at a certain age. And Trump tried to reverse it. And they're like, you can't do it. You can't do it. He certainly could. But they tried to block him and they used the courts to do it. Here's how TikTok's ban would work. The TikTok ban comes with a $5,000 per day per user fine. That would mean, based on the current estimates, Apple, Google, Amazon, Oracle, etc., would be charged $850 billion per day. Now, as an American citizen, that is money that's entitled to me. I have standing here. That's public coffers, right? Congress, our reps passed the bill. The Senate passed the bill. The president signed the bill. And now here we are. Donald Trump says he's going to sign an executive order halting liability and enforcement for 90 days. It won't work. And let me explain why. They still may do it. They still may restore it because there are larger forces at play. But mathematically, it doesn't work because publicly traded companies must disclose risk to their shareholders. I think it would be a particularly interesting day when Apple, Google, Amazon, etc., issue disclosures to the shareholders saying, we intend to violate the law because the president has told us he won't hold us criminally liable for 90 days, but the penalties will still be on the books. It's never going to happen. Dude, anybody who's ever done any work with a publicly traded company is going to be like, ain't no way they're going to play that game. They're engaging in illegal activity under a promise from the president. Your stock is going to crumble. There's risk for no reason. Why would you issue a risk disclosure to kill your own stock? Why would you take an action that would kill your own stock? Seems highly unlikely. But my friends, there's one big factor at play that mostly gets overlooked, and it's insurance and reinsurance. I'd be willing to bet that Apple, Google, Amazon, they've got probably 50 different insurance companies. Actually, it's probably more than that. With all the countries they operate in, with all the different laws they have to deal with, they probably have hundreds of insurance companies insuring various facets of those businesses. Now, I put it like this. Let's say they said, the law is passed. You cannot drive without a license, right? So that's a law that exists, right? Imagine the president came out and said, no, I'm instructing all law enforcement to ignore the licensing requirement for driving. Do you think your auto insurance would keep insuring you if you told them you intended to drive without a license? they'd say, yeah, no. And you'd be like, but the president said he's not going to hold it against me. And they're like, we don't care. We assume the risk and have to pay it out if something goes wrong. So here's how the game's going to be played. With the law in the books right now, what happens? If Apple, Amazon, any of these companies restore TikTok, they are on the books liable criminally for $5,000 per users per day. They're going to put $850 of potential liabilities on their books every single day. And Trump says, don't worry, we won't enforce this for 90 days. What happens after the 90 days? The 90 days goes up. Trump's executive action fails. And now Apple's like, we have a criminal liability of $850 billion for the one day we operated this. Imagine if they did it 90 days. Now, what would likely happen is, because ain't nobody going to be paying, $80 trillion to the U.S. government doesn't exist, to shut the companies down, they'd likely negotiate some settlement where they pay a fine. Why would any one of these companies accept that? I don't see it. So right now, Trump can say what he wants to say, but it's likely not going to come back anytime soon. The app may be functioning because that was always the case. We got this post from Andy No. He says part of the reason many conservatives have suddenly done a surprising 180 on TikTok may have to do with the fact that a billionaire conservative megadonor owns 15%, worth about $33 billion of ByteDance. And he does not want the company divested into U.S. ownership, perhaps. Drew Pavlov says this: when you open a link to another website from within the TikTok app, TikTok injects tracking code that can monitor all keystrokes, including passwords and all taps. Please explain to us why the Chinese government have a First Amendment right to do this to 170 million Americans. And then I'll throw it to our good friend Riley Gaines, and I mean that one seriously this time. I'm going to tell you this. You may have seen the debate I had with Bobby Sauce on Timcast IRL. And I've gotten a lot of praise from those who support the ban on TikTok because I made this point. I said, as Bobby defended TikTok, and I recognize he takes issue with this framing of the argument, I said, how many followers do you have on YouTube? And he's like 5,100 or something. I said, how many followers do you have on Twitter? And he said, 5,000. How many followers do you have on TikTok? 155,000, but that's not the reason I'm defending it. No, it is. End of story. Bobby argued to us that the discovery on TikTok was better. The algorithm is better. But your followers don't matter if it's not a reverse chronological feed. TikTok is an algorithmic feed, meaning people will hit follow. All they're doing is saying to TikTok, this is the kind of stuff I do like. But they're not actually following your content. It's an interest-based algorithm. So here's what we end up seeing. Many prominent conservatives came out all of a sudden for TikTok, despite the fact that many of us have been critical of TikTok the whole time. Timcast IRL was on TikTok, and so was my personal. And then Donald Trump called out the censorship. He called out the bias, and so did we. Why? Because we have called out X, Facebook, and all the platforms. So what happened? We got nuked from TikTok. That's it. Just gone. So our account with, I think we may have had like 30,000 followers, something like that. We got taken down. No warning, no recourse, nothing, just gone. And I think it happened more than once. I think they deleted us. We made a new one, gained followers, they deleted us again. They will not let us have our conversations. Why? Because we're critical of China, the CCP. We largely call for strengthening the United States. And now take a look at this. I will say this to Riley Gaines with all due respect for the work that she does. She does not know about foreign policy and national security. This is not her area of expertise. It is only slightly mine, but foreign policy is one of my principal issues that I care deeply about. And I know quite a bit about cyber war having to do with China because I've been involved in the space for almost 2 decades now. Just shy of 2 decades. Riley Gaines and many others are defending the interests of China to run mass media in the United States and a large economic platform, which is psychotic. TikTok can operate. Totally fine. But it can't be under the fist of China. 170 million Americans. And they are literally right now putting forward anti-America rhetoric. Now, Riley Gaines made the argument to me. Well, she made the argument in general. I responded. She said, many people, she said, I had 600,000 followers. It means a lot of young people on TikTok want to hear what I have to say. Bravo, Riley. 600,000 is a great number. Dylan Mulvaney, fighting in the opposite direction, had 13 million, around there. So I'm sorry. In terms of propaganda and manipulation, the woke side was getting a massive push, and they threw crumbs to conservatives who have American values to make them argue on behalf of Chinese propaganda. Now, you want to come to me and say, but X and Facebook are American propaganda. You are correct, and we won. Elon bought X, FOIA requests, the Twitter files, Mark Zuckerberg backed down, Trump wins. So I think they're all largely making a mistake as it pertains to defending TikTok. Now, Riley Gaines tweeted, here's a map showing Chinese-owned farmland conveniently located near 19 U.S. military bases. But yes, please tell me more about how banning TikTok is because we have a government deeply committed to protecting our national security. I'd like to point out that Hawaii is not owned by... This map is so silly. Excuse me. It's not real. This is a fake map. And this is another part of the problem. Where did this fake meme come from? Guys, Hawaii is not owned by China. Take a look. I'm pointing at it. On this map, it shows the Hawaiian Islands, and the main island of Hawaii is entirely owned by China. It's not. Then you can take a look at the majority of North Carolina. These are not correct. While China does own a lot of farmland, and it is a bad thing, this meme is not correct. Now, I'll put it this way. I'll give you my response. Where did I just open up? There we go. I said this. Okay. China running mass media is to 170 million people will shatter the minds of our next generation. Owning farmland is also bad. China doing bad things is the point. We are taking action to stop it. One Fed with a clipboard can seize Chinese-owned farmland. You cannot seize back the minds of a generation. This is why TikTok is banned in China, and it's why all our other social media is too. So let me stress this for you, my friends. China banned TikTok in their own country because even they don't trust it. Meanwhile, they have Douyin, which runs, I don't know, science, math, and engineering. People have long pointed that out. But let's go to this point about the farmlands. First of all, this is a ridiculous argument. Just because China does two bad things does not mean we let them do another bad thing. In what reality are people arguing that China does bad stuff, so we should let them do other bad stuff? It's the weirdest thing ever. And I mean it. One Fed in a hard hat with a vest on and a clipboard can walk onto Chinese-owned farmland and sign, nope, we have hereby seized this property. Goodbye. And what's China going to do about it? They're not going to come and take the farmland from us. They have it only by our good graces. But with TikTok, they convince kids to share the Bin Laden letter and praise the arguments of Osama bin Laden. Now I hear you. A bunch of people going, Tim works for Israel because he's critical of China. It is true. Because I'll be the first to admit, to tell you the truth. Democrats had no interest in banning TikTok until October 7th. With 127,000 posts, pro-Palestine content had 11 million views. Meaning, despite the fact that people were spam blasting it, nobody wanted to watch it. 1 week. In 1 week, with 87,000 posts, 285 million views, which is indicative of ByteDance, TikTok intentionally altering the algorithm to promote pro-Palestine content. Now, the people who are deeply obsessed with Israel-Palestine view this as, so what? We have a right to call it Israel. The people who think Israel is the biggest boogeyman in the world and think the Jews control everything are going, yay, China's fighting the bad guys. They're insane. China wants you fighting me and me fighting them, etc., etc. The purpose of propping up pro-Palestine content is one. It is opposed. It is, excuse me, it is against U.S. foreign policy. Not that I'm a fan of that foreign policy, but China is doing this to disrupt the minds of a younger generation, to disrupt American foreign policy. It works. And two, it is to sow discord in the United States. The same can be said for Russia or Iran or Venezuela. All of it is true. China owning farmland is a bad thing. Let's stop them from doing it. But let's also not let them run mass media to 170 million people. Now, I'll tell you what's scary. Excuse me, man, coughing. What's scary is China, through TikTok, has effectively convinced, man, I must have, now you got to hear me cough. China has convinced Americans to advocate for Chinese interest. There should be no problem whatsoever with any American saying, yeah, why is China owning this? There's literally no argument. The only argument that makes sense, even a little bit, is, We don't want the government to have the power to ban social media apps. But this this bill is not overly broad. It says it's only one of 4 countries. They have to reach a certain threshold, be a subsidiary of or controlled by one of these countries. It's not overly broad. It's a weird argument that people are making. And I'll tell you this. When they say, if we allow them to ban TikTok, it's a slippery slope and they're going to ban X next. No, they're not. We fight for what we care about now. The slippery slope is a lie because there's always going to be a slippery slope. If we allow China to run a mass media program in this country, you will have a generation of young people hating this country. Dylan Mulvaney with 13 million followers and Riley Gaines with 600,000. Need I say more? If we allow that. Or we can just say, yeah, sorry, China. And then if later on a president comes in and says, I'm going to use this law to try and ban X, we go, no, we don't like that. And we won't allow it because there's the spirit of the law and there's the letter of the law. And there is and this is why I would consider myself to be more post-liberal these days. I asked a question to, I think it was to Bobby. He kept saying, look, we want smaller government, we want free speech, therefore the bill shouldn't be. And I said, no, there is no such thing as this liberal universal principle. This idea that we believe in free speech, that means we must defend it for all. No, wrong. We believe in free speech for those who believe in free speech. I'll give it to you simply. There's a question I like to ask. I asked it on the culture war. Do you believe parents have the final say in the medical decisions of their children? I'll give you a second to think about it. I'll say it one more time. Do you believe parents should have the final say in medical decisions for their children? I ask this for one simple reason. Most people say yes, of course, because principally, the idea of the parents having the rights over their kids makes the most sense. We're talking about medical decisions, obviously not abuse or anything like that. We're talking about going to a doctor and then the parent deciding what treatment they want for their kid, right? Okay. Well, here's the problem. Liberals would say yes. Conservatives would also say yes. And then the question of trans children comes up and both would invert their positions. If a conservative if there's a liberal who has a child and that child says that they are trans and they go to the doctor and the doctor says, let's sterilize them. Conservatives believe the state should intervene and stop the parents from making that choice for their kids. It's not a choice. They're mutilating their kid. They don't get to say in that. Right. Because the spirit of what is meant by the principle is not the same as a universal principle. Clearly, if you believe parents have the final say, there is a line somewhere morally. If a conservative has a child and that child is also dysphoric, and the conservative says, we will not allow you to get gender-affirming care or a sex change. Liberals believe the child should be able to go to school and go to Planned Parenthood and receive medical treatment without their parents' wishes. In fact, there's numerous prominent LGBT creators on TikTok gained prominence by telling kids how to get hormones and why they should not tell their parents. There is no universal principle. There is only fighting for what we believe in now. And that is a just and moral society. And that means we want free speech, a free exchange of ideas, but we don't want people advocating for murder or violence. It means we want sound medical decisions, but we also think there's a line where doctors are crossing. It's not really medicine. So there's no universal principle or morality. There is only our interpretation of it. That is, TikTok should be banned unless they divest from China. And if in the future action is bad and they try to take it against us, we fight against it. So in the meantime, use TikTok, my friends. It's still there. We'll see how things go. It's the inauguration day. There's still so much more news to cover. We got a lot of great stories coming up. Thanks for hanging out. Stay tuned. Follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. We'll see you all in the next segment.